Okay. Thanks again for being here with me, folks. I'm Yvette Gibbs. I'm the founder and managing director of Awujo Consulting. And I don't like to read slides to people, so I won't be doing that for most of this presentation. So let's advance to the next slide so you can see for yourself a little bit about me and what Awujo stands for. So. Okay, and since we have a small group today, I would like to take a little bit of time to do introductions if that's fine. And if you're okay with an introduction, you can raise your hand using the technology. If you're not okay, don't raise your hand. Um, and to kick this off, I'm going to start with the moderator, and I'm going to ask that everyone give their name, location, and why this topic interests you. So, Edwin, I've given your first name. You can go ahead and do the rest.
Hey, my name is Edwin Rodriguez. I'm currently based out of Rochester, New York. Yeah, this topic is very interesting to me in general. Uh, the most important reason I'm here is because Yvette's asking for a little help on the tech side, so I'm here to provide that. So that's the main reason.
Yes, and Edwin, thank you for being
Yes.
interested in the topic and also being here to support me. So we'll go to the next person. I see with their hand raised is, well, George, you came off from having your hand raised. Did you want to speak or no?
No, I just hadn't realized that it'd come down. My apologies.
That's okay.
Technology is too much. So I'm George Brough. I'm CEO of Artha Leadership. We're a global consulting firm based in Brazil, and we help transform companies through transforming their leadership and their teams. And I'm here because I think that you can't transform companies if you don't have psychological safety in the workplace. And anything I can learn about how to do that better is massively important and massively interesting. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Now, Jim, I'll pass it to you.
Sure, thanks, Yvette. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
My name is Jim Olson. I am the Senior VP of Sales and Marketing from a startup company called Attchron, who specializes in free space optical communications equipment. We are a provider, and we are developing and patented the technology that's the basis for what we do. The company is small, will likely grow fast, and Yvette, you and I have had many conversations on leadership, psychological safety in the workplace, and building a collaborative and open environment in the company. And that's particularly important when we're a startup and we get to establish that early in the life of the company.
Thank you, Jim. And yes, we've had several conversations, and I appreciate all of them, and I appreciate learning from everyone that's in this meeting. Thank you for all of your support, and again for being here today. So let's go on to the next slide on the challenges of challenges to psychological safety. So again, not going to read the slides for you, so I'm going to give you a chance to look that through. And while you're looking that through, I would like for you to list in the chat um, anyone that resonates with you. It could be, you can have multiple answers, and if all of them resonate, you can say all of them resonate. So take a couple of minutes to look at that, think it through, and let us know. Thank you, George, for your response. Thanks, Edwin. And I want to let you know too that none of these are in order of importance. So they are suggestions, and they may resonate with you on both a personal and a professional level. And to highlight George's expertise too, if there are any listed here that are a challenge to your organization, let us know. George is one of the top 5 action learning consultants as recognized by Dr. Michael Marquardt, the past president of the World Institute for Action Learning. So to translate that, to do the English to English translations, as you and I know to do, Jim, that means that he's a business transformation specialist and he's an expert in the action learning methodology. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the chat and let's see what you have said, Jim. So I'm going to read this for everyone. Cultural barriers and unconscious bias are important in tech, with engineers and suppliers must work together from around the world. Absolutely, absolutely. And we can spend more time talking about that during the Q&A session, because I'd like to have that be an open or a portion of the open discussion. So is that okay with you, Jim? Can we save that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Another thing I want to say is, having worked with clients of all sizes, from enterprise level to small business, George and I not only know the symptoms of these challenges, we know how to address them as well. The first step in recognizing the issue is raising awareness. And for what it's worth, the symptoms are usually the same wherever they present themselves. However, they are experienced differently. Poor internal communication looks different at a hospital than it does a restaurant, for example. So let's go to the next slide, Edwin, on practical tools and techniques. Oh, apologies. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I'm so sorry, Edwin. Could you go back to strategies to overcome the challenges? I got ahead of myself. So everything I just said about George should be applied to this slide here. I apologize. But again, still holds true. So now we can go to the practical tools and techniques slide, Edwin. Okay. So here are some tools and techniques that can be used to overcome these challenges. I come from the assessment space. I started my career in the assessment industry in 2024. So I've been in the space for almost 20 years. And assessments are a great way of figuring out the dynamics between individuals. It kind of gives them a head start with building their relationship. Assessments have changed so much in the last 20 years. Maybe 2 years ago it was, when the show was still on. It's a show called The Babysitters Club. I watched that with my 8-year-old niece at the time, and there was an episode dedicated to assessments. So again, it's changed a lot, it's grown a lot, and people are experiencing it or experiencing them much more. So it's more of a common thing, and it's a tool that's used by many. Awujo has selected Gallup as the assessment provider, and I'm happy to say that they've been D&I advocates since 2017. So another way, another tool is feedback. Collect it, study it, use it, and share the findings. When you do surveys, keep in mind that if you ask your team a question, if you go to get information from them, the natural next thing is for them to ask themselves is, what's going to be done with this information? So if you ask the question, be ready to provide an answer and some insight on how that information would be used. And that's going to also help you to keep that trust going as well. So looking at the right side of the screen, conflict management. Conflict isn't bad. It's how you manage the conflict that shapes the experience. So I would like to see the word conflict be a word that is less triggering and actually encourages people to be curious, to understand what the conflict is, and to work together to resolve that. Another thing, another tool is mentorship programs. They can really foster a culture of learning. Personality assessments can be used in that process too, or in that technique too, because again, they can help to give people information about themselves. It's not easy to come up in just basic conversations, and it gives them a nice starting point. So it could be used as an icebreaker with those relationships, or it could be used as a tool to help them throughout that mentorship process. So before I move on here, and since it's a small group, do we have any questions?
No, not this time.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Thanks, Edwin. So companies committed to psychological safety. I very much thank Google for their research and raising awareness on psychological safety. It's not as well known, but they kind of, I'm not going to say kind of, they brought psychological safety to the world of work. So prior to that, it was within academia. There was a Yale student there that later went to work with Google and led Project Aristotle. So without that forward thinking, if you will, we wouldn't have access to the conversations, the tools, and everything that's related to psychological safety. And as Jim stated previously, and as we know, it's very important to have that for teams to come together and work well. It's crucial. So, okay, and for NASA is another one that they have a very strong safety culture, and I'm sure you can imagine why. So, I appreciate Google for their research, for their studies, and NASA for really embracing that safety culture. So we can go to the next slide on action steps. Okay, so I'll give you some time to look at this through as well. One of the things that you should start with, or I would recommend starting with, is asking yourselves, what culture do you really want? Do most companies even know what they want their culture to be like? This is something that really has to be talked about. It has to be understood. You can't just say, I want to improve the culture. You have to be ready to look at the culture and hear the people and make some adjustments. And again, George Brough is a business transformation, excuse me, a business transformation specialist. And Awujo is here to help with that as well. So any questions on this slide, anyone? No? Okay. All right, and the conclusion here, we'll go to that slide, is that engaged employees plus satisfied customers equal financial results, period. It really is that simple. To quote Gallup again, they have studied this and they have put a number on the cost of low employee engagement. And that number is $8.8 trillion. And that's an annual figure. So we need to pay attention to this. It's not just a nice to have, it's a must have. And the other thing with psychological safety is it fosters innovation. So it's important. It's important. That's pretty much it for this part of the presentation. The next part will go into demystifying DEI, but before we move on from psychological safety, I want to give the people in the call, in the meeting, a chance to ask any questions. If anyone wants to come off mute, go ahead, Jim.
That was good. I look a good summary. I think you distilled it nicely, and I think fairly self-explanatory. So you tied the activities and program into dollars and cents, which in the business world is critical. So I think that's really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there was a wise person that I spoke with and suggested I do that. And I received some feedback from a friend of mine who went to a convention not long ago. And that was the feedback that they received too. So you were on point with that, Jim.
Yvette, I have a question for you. What is it that stops companies creating psychological safety in the workplace?
I would say they don't know where to start. They simply don't know where to start. It can be a very emotional conversation for some. It could be a conversation that requires them to talk about past experiences. It can be a delicate conversation. And it can put some people at risk of exposure, to be totally honest. But exposure, again, like conflict management, exposure doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to be an, oh my God, I'm getting fired. That's not what psychological safety is supposed to do. You're not supposed to fear losing your job. What should happen is you should be able to have the conversation and say why it's hard to approach this topic and how can we come together to make people comfortable, or at least give people the comfort that they need to be vocal. And that would be part of promoting a speak up culture. And I say culture, not environment, culture, because everyone has to support that. So it's not just a bottom up approach, or I should say a top down approach. It's more of a bottom up approach. It's more listening to the people at the front line, hearing what's said, and understanding how that's impacting the business, and bringing that up to the people that can support those changes.
I mean, George brings up a good point. So how does a company know that they're in a, oh, I'll second.
You're on mute again, Jim.
Sorry. Yeah, how does a company know that things have gotten out around? Sometimes you don't recognize it or even realize it. And then when you do, if you do recognize it, how do you get it back into the position you want it to be? What are the actions?
So the how do you recognize it would be low engagement. So it would be people missing deadlines. It would be absenteeism. It could be a list of things. And when those things are recognized, the conversations need to start. And if people need support with having those conversations, I'm here as a coach, so I can help an individual to learn how to share their feelings with their managers in a way that can be received, can be accepted. George and I are here to talk with organizations whenever they recognize that and realize that they need to address it. There are a lot of different ways in how we can get to an understanding, but we would have to start with a conversation. Sometimes surveys can be overutilized in organizations. So to start with a survey in some instances may not bring about the feel of the engagement that's desired. So you really can't take a one size fits all approach. You really do have to have the conversation to learn what there's an appetite for, to learn what was done in the past, and to see how to move it forward. Does that answer your question, Jim? And does that better?
It sort of does. I mean, it's a little bit of the parable of the boiling frog, right? When you're in it, and you turn the heat on, you'll sit in there till you boil to death, right? So if you come into an organization, how do you help that organization recognize if there's a problem? I mean, the inquiry might simply be assess where we are in a continuum, and how high on the scale are we, or low on the scale are we, in creating a psychologically safe workplace.
Yeah, so
I tend to start with are things working, right?
Mhm.
So if things are working fine, then you've probably got all the psychological safety that you want. And by things working fine, I mean you're growing the way you want to grow, you're hitting all your deadlines, all the product launches are working fine, everything's great, right? That's very rarely the case, right? You start with, all right, so why? Why are people not hitting the deadlines? Why are you not growing the way you want to grow? And that's when you find out that most companies adopt the beatings will continue until morale improves approach.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so what you're doing is not working. Therefore, you need to figure out something else to do. And that's what gives you the in to have the the conversation that says, well, who are the people who are actually doing the work or not doing the work?
mhm.
People in the front line. Therefore, you need to find out from them what is it that needs to change, and that's what brings you into the psychological safety conversation. But it requires it, as you know, Jim. If you start from, are you hitting your targets, right? Are you hitting what you want? And if the answer is no, then something has to change, right? And presumably, most organizations have tried several different things to hit the targets before they kind of externalize that to the outside world. So you can be pretty confident that one of the things they haven't tried is actually asking the people on the front line what's going wrong and what can we do differently.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's that bottom up approach. Listening to your front line, because they're the closest to your clients. So listening to them, hearing what they have to say, understanding their challenges, not just in terms of what the business issue is, but what communication issues they may be having. You can be able to kind of tease out the management challenges if you listen to the folks on the front line, and then you can approach that on a case by case basis.
Yeah, the interesting part of it is a company could be performing poorly because it has a crappy product. I mean, and people could be doing their job and still not creating success.
Mhm.
So how do you go in and assess that? So and by the way, going into senior management and saying you've got a people problem is one issue, but going into management and saying you've got a product problem is a different one.
Yeah.
So you may have both.
The clients are going to let them know if it's a crappy product.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one way to see the difference there. Is it that the employees don't understand the product, or is it the product isn't understandable? So
I agree. Yes.
yeah, so that would be a situation where you'd have to have that conversation with the front line to figure out what the client issues are. And in some instances, is it a problem that could be resolved, and the issue just is not best understood by management because they are not able to connect with it the way that the people on the front line are. That's a possibility.
Mhm.
So, there could be a lot of different reasons that psychological safety is not felt. There could be a lot of different ways as to how that impacts clients, how that impacts productivity, performance, all of that. But we have to be able to come in and have the real conversations, the hard conversations, and not sugarcoat what's happening. You really have to be able to say, okay, this is an issue, and get to why that's an issue and how it's impacting both the people and the profits.
Right.
It's not one or the other. It's usually both. If
Yep.
you're having a sales problem, you have other issues going on too.
Good. Okay. Good.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, I didn't realize we were at time now. So thank you. Let's go to the next slide, Edwin. Apologies. Okay, so this is the slide on demystifying DEI. And I want you guys to join us November 14th to discuss this, to talk about this. There's two things that I want to point out to folks is, one, it's not new. DEI is not new. It's been around since the 60s. And it started off as diversity training, and it was started by the EEOC. So for as long as the EEOC is around, DEI will need to be around. And DEI is it's necessary. Diversity is necessary. So it's also inclusive. It stands to benefit everyone. One of the problems with DEI after the George Floyd murder was that it was exclusive. It was it was a reactive approach, as I see it. We didn't give ourselves as a country enough time to understand what happened, to understand the collective gasp and the cries. And we wanted to do a lot, but we didn't truly understand what the problem was and how long it had been an issue. So DEI is an inclusive initiative, including everyone, white men included, white cisgender straight men included. And DEI aims to overcome unconscious and conscious biases in an effort to put an end to trauma-inducing microaggressions. So we'll have that conversation on the 14th. I hope you can attend. And we can go to the next slide, Edwin. And if you want to have a coffee call with me, you can grab your phone, you can record, you can access this QR code, and you'll be taken to my scheduling calendar. And I would love to talk with you more about psychological safety. I would love to talk to you more about Artha leadership and Awujo's partnership. And I'm here to help people understand themselves, understand psychological safety, recognize microaggressions, and empower you. So if you have to deal with a macroaggression, you can stand up to that with confidence as well. So thank you for joining. I appreciate the time. And Edwin, you can stop the recording.